Someone going on television, even a comedian, and making jokes about the president, mocking, his ankle size.
South Park, they were not mocking his ankle size, let's just say that. They went a little further, I'd say.
Welcome to Power Lines. I'm Jon Passantino.
And I'm Oliver Darcy.
We have a fantastic show for you today. We're going to be discussing Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart's response to CBS's shock decision to cancel The Late Show, the Wall Street Journal's latest explosive report on Donald Trump's Epstein connection. Apparently, he's now in the Epstein files, while Fox News runs cover. But first, let's start with the Washington Post. We saw some pretty dramatic changes in their staffing with what seems like the latest purge over there. A number of really high-profile names have all either announced their exit or have just quietly headed for the doors. We got some new reporting in the Status newsletter this week that Adam O'Neill, the new Washington Post opinion editor, has started his tenure there with office hours, allowing folks on the opinion desk to schedule time to come meet with him. Sort of unusual way of approaching the job, but he's kind of had an unorthodox start to his time there altogether. You might recall that he announced he was joining the paper with a direct-to-camera selfie video that he posted on X. No press release from the paper. No grand announcement of we have, found the esteemed editor to carry the flag forward here. It's all been a little unusual. And now we're hearing Adam has started his position there at the Post. And with these meetings with members of the staff, he's had some quiet conversations with them, a bit of which you heard about this week. And I think sort of offering some clues as to what it is that he has in store for changes at the desk there.
Well, I don't think anyone knows what he has in store. I mean, I think the only thing that's been really telegraphed is when Jeff Bezos abruptly emailed the Washington Post staffers and said that they are going to be now focused in the opinion pages on promoting economic freedom and personal liberties, which is a very broad mandate. I mean, a lot of things could fall under those categories. If you think about personal liberties in particular, as they're under assault in American life because of the president. I mean, a number of things you could write about that fall under promoting personal liberties, whether it's, it could range from the way immigrants are being treated in this country to what the president is doing to Harvard. I mean, there's a number of different things you could write about under that banner. So it's unclear, I think, what exactly the Washington Post opinion pages are for. And there hasn't been much insight from the new editor, Adam O'Neill, in these conversations. These writers only get told basically what they don't want, not really what they want to stand for. So anyway, they had these conversations this week, people that signed up for them. Strangely, I think it is strange that Adam O'Neill came in and instead of asking the writers to meet with him, basically they have to sign up to meet with him, which is sort of unorthodox. So they've been signing up to meet with him. They've been going into his office, which I was told overlooks McPherson Square. Apologies, it apparently overlooks Franklin Square. McPherson Square is a block away. Although I will say for the DC people, it's strange that the McPherson Square subway stop is in Franklin Square. So it is a little bit convoluted. But
this has been a huge overnight scandal here at Status with many readers in DC.
Many readers have emailed
letting us know we got
the
this
Washington
wrong.
Post overlooks. I still wonder, he has a corner office on the 8th floor is what I'm told. I'm still wondering if you can maybe see McPherson Square as well. But regardless, we digress. They've been having these conversations. And the interesting thing from these conversations is that Adam has been using what I've been told is sort of sounds like HR vetted language, telling certain people that their column doesn't really fit into the future of what the Washington Post opinion pages are going to be for. And so he's been effectively encouraging them to take these buyouts, which are set to expire July 31st. And in the last week, 2 weeks, I guess, you've seen an astonishing exodus from the Washington Post opinion pages. Jonathan Capehart left. Philip Bump left. Catherine Rampell announced she was leaving. A number of others have all announced they're leaving. And these are the people that have really defined the Washington Post opinion pages over the last decade or so. And they're just taking buyouts. And then a couple others are moving to the newsroom. It's unrelated, but there's this incredible drain happening at the Washington Post opinion pages. It seems like it's not just about, normal housekeeping. I think when a new manager comes in, maybe they bring in one or two other people or whatever. This is about completely resetting the slate. And it's not even only occurring on the talent side of things. It's also occurring on the editing side of things, where top editors like Steven Stromberg and a couple others, like they're all set to depart. And so everyone, that I'm talking to, they're wondering, what is the Washington Post opinion page going to be? And if I had to guess, I would say that Bezos wants this paper, the editorial board, to be conservative and probably a little more Trump friendly, but they can't say that. And so I think they maybe are trying to use code words like pro-economic freedom, pro-personal liberties, which I think he might associate with libertarian values. Again, though, even if you're a libertarian these days, Trump's not a libertarian. Trump is really trying to rule like an authoritarian. And so you're still going to have an editorial board that's probably at odds with him on almost every issue.
Yeah, it feels like this is a way for Bezos to try to stake out some kind of safe high ground with libertarianism at the center of it versus, overtly saying we want it to be more conservative, more MAGA friendly, more culture war, in that vein in which you've seen almost all of right-wing media bend in recent years with Donald Trump. And it's sort of like a similar appeal concept, I think, to the way others perceived Barry Weiss's The Free Press as a sort of libertarian flag there.
That's what they all want these days. They want Barry Weiss, they want free press, they want anti-woke, they want like pro, economic liberty, although Donald Trump's trade war, I think, definitely clashes with that, but that's what they want. And I think, what was really interesting, John, as I was reporting this, it was flagged to me that Monica Hesse, I don't know if I'm saying her last name correctly, but she writes about gender and society for the Washington Post. That position was one of the only positions, to my understanding, that Bezos personally requested be formed at the Washington Post. It was during the height of the Me Too era, and it was his idea to have someone writing about gender and society. And so they tapped her for this role, and she's been writing about that ever since. Earlier this year, she was on the news side. She was a news columnist. They decided that she was, I guess, more fit for the opinion pages, so they moved her over to the opinion pages. And she was one of the people that Adam O'Neill, the new editor of the opinion pages, told doesn't really fit into the future for the editorial pages. And I think that really shows two things. One is how much Bezos has apparently changed over the last 5 years, where he was someone who wanted to have a writer specifically writing about gender issues in the Me Too movement, to someone who apparently doesn't want that position, maybe even at the paper anymore. And it also shows, obviously, this massive transformation of the Washington Post, where, again, she was a celebrated writer there and is now effectively being told, you should probably take this buyout because your column does no longer aligns with what we're going to be doing here in the opinion pages.
Yeah, I sort of get the feeling that, to me, that signals that Bezos is somewhere difficult to sort of peg on the political charts, where just years ago he was riding the wave with his newspaper saying, this is a very important issue in America, when America was out, coming out and saying these things, right? We had a reckoning around racial issues, around diversity, and around that culture. And, you saw Bezos also really lean into his companies taking a hard stand on climate change and green energy. But now you see that sort of all melt away so quickly. Is that just him being politically expedient and a shrewd businessman who has a large financial empire that he runs? And this paper is, the size of the Washington Post, while it has a meaningful impact on on journalism and on the news media and on how Americans perceive what is going on in Washington, like financially, it's a drop in this, vast bucket that Bezos controls. And all of these changes signal to me that above all else, he is like a politically expedient operator here, that more than anything, he is looking at like what is going to help my economic and business empire as a bottom line more than anything. And the question that I have though is like seeing these really vast sweeping changes at the Post opinion desk and the paper as a whole, right? Like there's been an exodus across the board, and outlets like The Atlantic have been scooping up really talented, well-sourced, great writers and reporters in recent days. But who is going to be the audience for this at the Washington Post that is going to continue their subscription and say, oh yeah, I used to feel that way too, but I've also significantly changed my views?
It makes no sense. I mean, I feel like, I think a couple things happened. One, I think foam party Jeff Bezos was maybe a little different. I feel like the COVID pandemic radicalized a lot of these business executives and changed them, and they became like susceptible to the stuff that Barry Weiss and company are selling, which is like this anti-woke. Your employees are kind of whiny babies, and you need to like really whip them into shape, and they need to come to the office, and we don't want to hear about them whining. They should be happy they have a job. I feel like something shifted in the minds of business executives during the COVID pandemic. And I think Jeff Bezos certainly falls into that category. And obviously it's politically expedient now to be a little bit more on the pro-Trump side of things. But what's interesting is that point you made, which is that from a purely business perspective, there's this huge void in the market right now for a major news organization, I think, to say, while everyone else is bending the knee to Donald Trump, we are standing firm. We are not doing that. We are holding his administration to account. And we're going to be proud about that. We're going to like have our chest out, and we're not going to like take anything from this administration. And I feel like that would actually rally an audience behind the Washington Post. The whole democracy dies in darkness thing would actually mean something, and people would be proud to be subscribing to this paper, especially in this moment, because you're seeing every other news organization, or at least I shouldn't say every other, but a lot of other news organizations soften their coverage, water it down, and in some cases overtly bend the knee, like you're seeing, over at Paramount. If the Washington Post were to do the opposite, I feel like it would actually be a very smart business strategy, because people would want to subscribe to that paper. Just like you're seeing at The Atlantic, where Jeffrey Goldberg has made it very clear this isn't a partisan issue. This is about standing up for what's right and wrong. This is about being pro-democracy and the standing up for the traditions that made America great, the principles this country has been built on. And that's working apparently really well for The Atlantic, right? They're able to hire more writers. They're doing quite well. I feel like if the Washington Post were to pick up that mantle and do the same thing, their business would be doing better. But instead, actually, every move that Jeff Bezos has made, he's supposed to be the smart businessman or whatever, just from every move that he has made has actually chased away subscribers. And it's made people less likely to subscribe to the Washington Post. So from like a purely business, forget the editorial rights and wrongs, even though this would be the right thing to do. Forget that. Just if you're selfish and you want the business of the Washington Post to do really well, this is obviously what you would do. But I think in the greater context of Bezos's empire, it's probably he doesn't care if the Washington Post flails a little bit. He'd rather have his contracts for Blue Origin and his Amazon contracts and deals. And so that's actually perhaps why he's okay letting the Washington Post not do so well. And I think that's sad, and that's not a good steward for this story newspaper.
No, I completely agree with you too. I think that like the Washington Post is being sacrificed here for the greater Bezos empire. And it's sort of in line of what we're seeing at other major outlets like Paramount, where the CBS News Division and 60 Minutes, that we're shredding these great institutions a little bit for financial expedience, for business transactions, for corporate mergers, or in this case, for the greater, Amazon, AWS, Blue Origin, business empire that Bezos commands. Yeah, and there's an easy, obvious playbook here, I think, too, for Bezos, which is to follow what the Wall Street Journal has recently done in the last several months, which is to be extremely relevant, to be on the news, to be delivering big, important breaking scoops that have moved the news cycle.
Rebuttals.
Yeah, and then on the opinion side, actually holding Trump to account, calling out, his decisions around, gosh, literally everything now, right? From his war on the truth with conspiracy theories coming back to bite with the Epstein files, with his the tariff war that he has launched, calling these things out. Those pack a punch, and I think that they continue to show the relevancy of the Wall Street Journal, despite it being owned by Rupert Murdoch, who is a well-known conservative media mogul who Trump has, picks up the phone and calls, at times, angrily so. But Bezos has a clear, obvious playbook here that he could pull from, but it seems like he just, that's not in the cards for him at the moment. He wants this paper to sort of hush down a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clear. And I think that's why he's fine with Will Lewis in the job. If he cared about the newspaper, he would probably have some significant questions for his publisher, because Will Lewis has been there for, a year and a half now, and the trajectory of the paper has only gone downhill. They've only done layoffs. They've only done buyouts. They've only had financial troubles. They've only shed subscribers. They haven't launched any new features. There hasn't been a grand plan that's rolled out that's really ignited excitement inside amongst the troops. They've just really overseen an unprecedented, I think, talent exodus, where, we thought, I think a few months ago, all those star writers leaving was wow, that was bad. And then things felt like they're stabilizing. But now this week, and as the buyouts continue, you're just seeing a incredible brain drain. I don't know if we've ever seen a major news organization lose this much of its talent from both behind the scenes and in front. And it really, I almost feel like I'm not going to know anyone at the Washington Post or the bylines of the Washington Post anymore, because so many of those people that you associated with the paper, the people that made up that paper, are going to be gone. And apparently Jeff Bezos is fine with that. And he's okay watching his paper burn. The Washington Post staffers, they pleaded with him. Hundreds of them signed a letter asking him, can you please just come to the newsroom for a day or for a few hours, talk to us? He ignored them. He's doing foam parties instead on yachts, right? He's going to Sun Valley. He's hanging out with his new wife. He's hanging out with movie stars and having them come to his wedding. That's where his brain is at, not at the Washington Post. And certainly it seems like not standing up to Donald Trump as he shreds basically every democratic norm that he can find. And I just think that, if he doesn't care about the newspaper, it's strange, not strange, but why doesn't he just sell it? Why doesn't he just give it to someone who actually gives a damn? And why is he okay watching this treasured institution that's played such a pivotal role, especially over the last several decades, just, suffer? It feels like it's a sad thing to see.
Yeah, it's certainly not helping his image in recent days. We're talking about him, and it's a talking point for a lot of people right now. What is going on with the Post? It does feel like we're at this moment where there's been so many staffers who have left that somebody could start a newspaper in Washington with all the former Washington Post reporters, and it would probably be a phenomenal paper. I'd probably kick a lot of ass and be very interesting. Some of these people that you named earlier, like Jonathan Capehart, Philip Bump, across the board, are some of my favorite writers there, or fantastic reporters with great analysis. And it is a shame what's going on there. Okay, well, we could go on about this for quite a while, but we'll have to put a pin in this for now. When we come back, we're going to be discussing what is going on with Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart and their reaction to this shocking decision about the end of The Late Show. Welcome back to Power Lines. Oliver, it was another incredible week in late night after CBS canceled The Late Show. We saw this really powerful backlash from late night hosts, both Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart, both of whom are under the Paramount umbrella. come out and pretty fiercely react to this decision to cancel Stephen Colbert and the entire Late Show franchise, really questioning and needling the idea that the network has put out there that they had to cancel the show. They had no choice because financially the show was unprofitable. Both Colbert and Stewart really have taken issue with this on their shows. What do you think about this whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was very interesting that last week the Paramount bosses said that this show was canceled for financial reasons, solely for financial reasons. And there were obviously these reports, leaked to the press. I wonder who was doing that. That said that Stephen Colbert's show was losing about $40 million a year, or on track to lose $40 million a year. I don't know, whatever, some crazy number. And immediately on Monday, you had Stephen Colbert basically shoot down those notions and make it very clear that he did not buy those. He was calling BS on the idea that this show was canceled for financial reasons. He was mocking the idea that his show is losing $40 million a year. And more powerfully, I think, his colleague, Jon Stewart, obviously these two are close friends. They came up together doing on Comedy Central. And Stephen Colbert used to do the Colbert Report right after The Daily Show. Jon Stewart said it. He said it outright that this show was not canceled for financial reasons. He attributed it to what we're seeing happen across the corporate media, which is that people are bending the knee to get something from Donald Trump for their businesses. And he had a very powerful message, I think, to the future owners and to anyone doing this. I was wondering what David Ellison and Sherry Redstone were thinking, because he outright told them, there's that whole thing at the end where he said to go fuck yourself. And he, I thought, had a very powerful point where he's talked about serving a gruel so flavorless that it's so inoffensive to the president that he basically said that's what they want. The problem with that is, one, it won't work because Donald Trump is the most thin-skinned man on earth, and even Rupert Murdoch has come under his fire. But two, no one wants to watch that. And the entire value of the Paramount property of these creatives is being a little edgy, making content that people actually want to tune in for. And if it's flavorless content, no one wants that. And so you don't have a successful media company. If Jon Stewart is so boring that he never offends anyone, particularly the president, then no one's going to be watching Jon Stewart. If Stephen Colbert is doing that, no one's going to be watching Stephen Colbert. If South Park is super boring and flat, no one wants to watch South Park. The reason people tune in for these shows is because they're entertaining, because they're on the news. They're having commentary on what's happening in our politics. And so I don't know. I was watching that and I was thinking, this is really compelling. He's making a lot of good points. And he's basically talking straight through the camera to David Ellison and saying, this is the right thing to do, morally and from a business standpoint. And if you want to fire me, whatever, do it.
I was actually surprised more so by Jon Stewart's response. I expected that he would come out of the gate and clearly have something to say here. Like you said, he and Colbert go way back to when Colbert was a correspondent on The Daily Show before the spinoff of his own. And I expected that, but I was surprised by how they took an entire 30-minute block with no commercials. And according to Late Nighter, that the producer on the show had reached out in advance to make sure that they had a TV mature rating, a very special adults-only programming theme, so that they could broadcast over cable, of course, the F word like three dozen times. I think it must have been like
more than that.
It must have been a record, right?
Yeah.
And they brought out the choir to sing a song to go F yourself. I was shocked by that. But I think if you were them, this is a moment where you have this incredible bowing down in their view of the corporation to ensure that they can get this Paramount Skydance merger deal across the finish line, which could happen any day now. By the time you're listening to this, this deal may already have been approved. We have heard, Oliver, you've reported that FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr could approve this deal as soon as Friday. So this could be any day now. So this could have sent up a very big signal flare of canceling Colbert, who has been a thorn in Trump's side and loved to poke fun at him. But let's be realistic here. Like Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, it doesn't matter who you name. These late night hosts, that's been their job for decades, is to poke fun at the news. You have your evening late night news, your local newscast at 11 p.m. It's very serious, but you stay tuned now for a comedian's take on the day, and that's going to involve the president. And when Joe Biden was the president, when Barack Obama was the president, you saw these comedians also make fun of them.
Well, those other guys were not shredding democracy.
Right,
and
well, that's
assaulting all our institutions on
everything
an hourly basis.
In
so
context
a little more
here.
difficult to hit them with the same like punches, because while they may have made fun, while they maybe had made some mistakes, obviously, no one's saying they didn't. There's a lot to make fun of for everyone. But Donald Trump, he's a particularly unique breed.
And we know that he is a media animal and that he has very thin skin. And so someone going on television, even a comedian, and making jokes about the president, mocking, his ankle size, or the color of his complexion, calling him
South
orange.
Park, they were not mocking his ankle size. Let's just say that. We're not mocking his ankle size.
No, they weren't.
They went a little further, I'd say.
Really a remarkable premiere to South Park. But this is the sort of thing though that like Trump does not. He's not okay with that, right?
Trump does not like his penis size mocked. No,
he does not. And so you have to see this through that lens of, was it really a $40 million hole that CBS needed to patch here? Was there anything else they could have done? They had the Ed Sullivan Theater, which is probably a pretty penny to continue to operate for this show. But you also look at the marketing value of having The Late Show as a franchise with Stephen Colbert. Like, that is a draw of why you need to watch CBS. That is a way that you continue to say, we have top talent on our air. Instead, now you have this new vacuum of what is the Tiffany network anymore? Who's even on there? Why should I even be watching it? Sure, I can watch an NFL game there on Sundays or whatever day that they have rights to it anymore. But what even is their top draw? And obviously you can say ABC has Jimmy Kimmel and they have David Muir. And we don't even see that now with the CBS Evening News with a rotating cast of anchors. And it feels like they have done really everything in their power to, yes, squeeze down the financials here to do more with less in some ways. But at the same time, what is the value proposition now? What are you buying? Who even needs to watch CBS?
Yeah, why would I watch CBS? I don't really understand what they're doing. I think they've actually deviated, obviously, significantly from the tradition of CBS, which had Letterman, but also was the home of Edward R. Murrow, the one who stood up to McCarthy. That's the history and legacy of CBS, and now it's the complete opposite. And it's again, sad to see. I don't know. In terms of the books, I'm sure every executive listening to this knows there are 1,000 ways to Sunday to cook those books, to make it seem like you're losing $40 million, or a lot of things that can be done. So I want to look at the books. Someone sent us the books. Let us look at them. If he's really losing $40 million, let's see it. I'm very curious how, and if he was losing $40 million, what was George Cheeks, who's the co-CEO of Paramount, what was he doing for the last few years? He was letting the show lose $40 million? That's crazy. Like, there was no real push to compress, to shave down those costs. That would be, it's really kind of striking to hear. He was losing $40 million and now we must cancel, right? Like there's always an in-between here. And I also think just from a broader standpoint, one of the failures of these organizations is they've made a lot of people like Stephen Colbert household names and stars, but they haven't really pushed them into the digital future in a real way. And they've allowed people like Joe Rogan to build these empires on new media platforms and make a lot of money in the process. And it is a bit of a failure to adapt from these executives, because Stephen Colbert is one of the most recognizable people in the country. He has a loyal following of people who love him. I am sure there's an economic model that will support Stephen Colbert. If you are a media executive and you have Stephen Colbert and you cannot find a way to make Stephen Colbert profitable, that says a lot more about you than it does about him. And the fact that there was no creativity or innovation there to figure out how do we get Stephen Colbert into the future outside just legacy property, and look what Conan O'Brien did, for instance, after being booted from the Tonight Show and then going to TBS. Now he has this podcasting empire. And why is it that these people always have to leave these networks to be successful in the landscape, the information landscape that most of us are playing in these days? That makes no sense. And I think
Joe Rogan would honestly kill for Colbert's ratings too. I mean, he's number one in late night and network broadcast, 2.5 million, 2.4 million on average viewers. That is not a rating point that you ever see somebody who's on YouTube, who's successfully making money, bringing in revenue and doing well.
I think Joe Rogan might surpass that. But
2.5 million concurrents?
Yeah, look at his. Let me pull up the Joe Rogan show's YouTube page.
I think that like total views, YouTube views are measured in like 30 seconds.
Sure, it's different. Yes, it's very different. But
so
he does get a significant amount of.
The point is that if Colbert is number one in late night, there may be a large staff.
I guess you're right. You are right. I mean, some of Joe Rogan's YouTube videos are well into the millions, 4.2 million, 3.6 million.
Yeah, because somebody watched for 30 seconds.
5 million.
I mean,
it's true.
Those YouTube numbers mean literally nothing. And
I stand corrected.
Yeah. So 2.5 million, average viewers live overnight is
concurrent.
Is a fantastic number. And the idea that we could not monetize that, and we saw sources familiar with the matter tell other media reporters this week as well that, look, Colbert has also not done as well online. If you look at his YouTube channel, he only has 2 million followers there versus Jimmy Kimmel, who has about 4 million followers. Okay. So this idea is that, well, he only has a couple million followers on YouTube in this moment. That also that just rings hollow to me as well, that audience could not be, grown, expanded. Colbert couldn't be doing more on these platforms.
Yeah, they can't invest in those platforms. I mean, that's another issue.
The idea that young people who are on these platforms are not interested in Colbert's commentary. I mean, come on, give me a break.
By the way, as they have no money for Stephen Colbert, they apparently are going to spend or have a lot of money for Barry Weiss. I mean, they're making choices about how they're spending their money. Barry Weiss is, I guess, trying to get a staggering and wildly crazy number of $200 million for the free press. I doubt anyone will pay that, and I can't imagine they'll pay that either. But David Ellison is trying to buy that. So, they have some money to spend and to invest in. They just don't want to invest in Colbert. And by the way, if David Ellison actually had nothing to do with this, and he's going to have the keys to the empire in a few weeks, he should reverse the decision. If he really disagrees with the decision and he had nothing to do with it, and he had no idea that this was going to happen, and he's appalled, then he should say, you know what? I don't know what the last managers were doing over here, but I am here, and let me tell you, Stephen Colbert is important to CBS, and he's going to stay here, and we're going to find a way to make this work. He has the power in, I'd say about 3 weeks, maybe a month. He has the power to do that. I bet he won't do it because I think he wanted Stephen Colbert gone. But let's see. Maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised that David Ellison will come in as a savior and restore Colbert's program. For those listening in the audience, don't recommend you hold your breath on this one.
Skydance has fiercely denied that Ellison had anything to do with this, that this was purely a decision by George Cheeks. Even Sherry Redstone, the Paramount longtime controller,
nothing to do with it.
She was only informed of the decision the day before.
George Cheeks, he just decided that, you know what, with new management coming in a few weeks, and we're not even cancel the show until next year. We're just gonna announce it now. We're just conveniently announce it right before new management comes in. It's very strange, very, very odd. And by the way, George Cheeks, has been the one at CBS or at Paramount who has been carrying the water for the people above him, particularly when it comes to 60 Minutes. He's the one that floated to CBS News chief Wendy McMahon that they maybe just don't air the season finale of 60 Minutes, which is crazy and insane. but that's what he floated to her. And so obviously George Cheeks, no one believes George Cheeks came up with that idea really on his own volition or without pressure from above. He was obviously trying to placate his bosses. In this case, Sherry Redstone, who wanted the 60 Minutes to be defanged while she tried to get this lawsuit settled and deal done. And so it's not like the man does not have a history of doing this sort of thing. And I have a hard time thinking he was independently operating here versus maybe getting a wink and a nod about what he should perhaps be doing.
No, and not attempting to even save the network's biggest star, top rated in the time slot. We could maybe go to him and say, hey, Steven, we're going to have to make some cuts here. It's tough times in television, especially in linear. You've maybe heard a thing or two about this. Instead of your contract being valued at X million a year, maybe we have to, cut into that a bit. We may have to move out of the Ed Sullivan Theater.
Or
there's a lot of history.
Cut one day, cut Fridays like they did over at the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, right? Cut that. Maybe maybe there's maybe 400 or whatever people in the live studio audience. Maybe you cut that down a little bit. Maybe the band isn't there a couple nights a week or whatever. There were a lot of different things that they could have done. I still have a hard time thinking the show is losing $40 million a year. I just don't buy that number.
Maybe there's a podcast as part of this deal, or there's a YouTube. There's a YouTube series that pops up as part of the deal. There are ways to continue to do it rather than just, we have to just cut the whole thing, end the franchise. It smacks of, we don't want to be in this business of, joking about lampooning the president who has the thinnest skin, who will only come back to bite us. It's not worth it. It feels like, in many ways, what we're seeing at other places where your news organization, which was once celebrated, is now your biggest liability.
By the way, before we go, I know we have to wrap the segment here, but it was shocking to me to see Jon Stewart interview. He delivered this scathing, blistering monologue, really impressive monologue where he took down the corporate powers that be who are bending the knee to Donald Trump. And then literally minutes later, he brought on Patrick Soon-Shiong, the owner of the Los Angeles Times, and he had him on for a softball, gentle, unchallenging interview. And it was just absolutely shocking. Like, Jon Stewart either has no idea who Patrick Soon-Shiong is, which is, not good on him and not good on the people who were supposed to prep him for these interviews, or he was willing to just do this very soft interview with Patrick Soon-Shiong, who is literally basically one of the media titans he told to go F yourself minutes before doing that interview. I mean, Patrick Soon-Shiong has moved the Los Angeles Times and tried to move it in a pro-MAGA direction. As we reported at Status, he explored hiring right-wing extremist Candace Owens. He was trying to do a show with anti-vaccine actor Rob Schneider. He asked the editorial board to maybe take a break from writing about Donald Trump. On and on and on this goes. He praises Scott Jennings while pressuring or moving out the liberal columnists over at his editorial board and his paper. And Jon Stewart has him on the show and says nothing, confronts him not once about any of the stuff that he's doing. I mean, I just thought it was shocking and frankly kind of appalling, because Patrick Soon-Shiong has been in a media safe space for so long. And when I saw this booking, I thought, wow, this is going to be good, because Jon Stewart's going to, he's going to do a nice interview in the beginning and he's going to reel him in, and then he's going to actually hit him with some hard questions, which I think it'd be nice to see Patrick Soon-Shiong face. But instead, no, just softball after softball after softball from Jon Stewart. Very strange.
Yeah, we're big fans of Jon Stewart and The Daily Show. I pretty much don't miss a Monday episode anymore. So I was very surprised. It felt like the front of that episode talking about CBS canceling Colbert's show was really right on the money in terms of tone and reaction. And then suddenly you fell into the Twilight Zone, where you bring Patrick Soon-Shiong on, and I wouldn't even call it softball in a way. It was fawning,
Glowing,
effusive with praise for him as a cancer researcher, developing drugs to fight, this great battle facing humanity. And while there is some truth to the fact that Soon-Shiong has developed, cancer drugs, I'm not sure that that's the timely element in this moment to have him on your program. That's not the reason why Soon-Shiong has been in the news lately. And you spoke to people at the Los Angeles Times and in the newsroom there, and they seem to have recoiled in.
They were furious. They were furious. They have been dealing with this man for the last 8 months, who was suddenly red-pilled and like praising RFK and instituting all these policies while cutting staff and investing or wanting to invest in people like Candace Owens and Rob Schneider and other things. And they thought that Jon Stewart was going to stand with them shoulder to shoulder and ask him some hard questions. And instead, like you said, it was a glowing, fawning interview where he held up Patrick Soon-Shiong as like this praiseworthy man. And,
there were numerous like applause lines in the episode where the audience was cheering him.
Well, and the audience is told, to cheer probably at certain points. But what was interesting too was that Patrick Soon-Shiong appeared to lie to Jon Stewart, because Jon Stewart asked, like something about like, this is the only time where it sort of was maybe going to go into a hard question territory, was like, how do you cover your own business as an owner? And he said, they don't cover my business. My business is not covered in the Los Angeles Times. We have reported that advertisements basically for his business have been randomly inserted into like the podcast there. And then, we asked about it and it disappears. I know from talking to a person familiar with the way he manages the paper that he applied pressure to cover his business interests in certain ways. This has been reported by others as well. And so the fact that Jon Stewart, again, either does not know this or was not prepped for this and ready to actually, respond in a meaningful way, it just doesn't even, I have a hard time actually understanding what happened there. Either he, for some reason, willfully chose to look the other way, or he was just incredibly unprepared for this interview. And I asked Comedy Central, and obviously they did not respond to my request for comment, but really a bad look and bad moment for Jon Stewart. And when I was talking to people at Los Angeles Times, I talked to one person who said that they were such a big fan and they will never watch a show again.
Yeah, what a mess. Really surprising for Stewart's show there, especially right on the heels of what he had said. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the latest explosive report at the Wall Street Journal on the Trump-Epstein connection. Welcome back. So, Oliver, this week we saw some incredible new reporting out of the Wall Street Journal about Donald Trump and his connections to Jeffrey Epstein. The latest we learned is that, according to the Journal, that it is Donald Trump's name that is in the Epstein files, that he and his lieutenants, his members of the administration that he has picked, have whipped up into really a storm of his own making, this controversy, this conspiracy theory, and it's not dying down. And what I found interesting with this story is it comes right on the heels of Donald Trump, as the president of the United States, launching an extraordinary lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch, the owner-controller. This is like uncharted territory for a news organization to be sued by the sitting president. I don't think this sort of thing has really ever happened in modern times. But this latest story shows, I think, that this issue is not going away, and that Trump is going to have to continue to deal with this serious issue with the Epstein files, that his base of MAGA media supporters continues to have outcry for.
Yeah, I think this shows that Rupert Murdoch is not backing down from Donald Trump. He's in for the fight here. And so they published that story last week about the note that Donald Trump apparently sent to Jeffrey Epstein for his birthday. And Donald Trump obviously tried killing that story. As we reported, he called Emma Tucker angrily and tried killing it. Then he apparently called Rupert Murdoch, and he was upset about that as well. And then he sued. And he sued the Journal. He sued Rupert Murdoch. He sued the reporters who wrote the story. And instead of, again, like a lot of other organizations, maybe cowering and backing down a little bit, the Wall Street Journal comes back with another huge blockbuster reporting that Donald Trump's name is in the Epstein files that all his supporters want released. And I don't know. I just think that this is indicative of where Rupert Murdoch's brain is at, and he's not he's not the type, I think, to just surrender to Donald Trump's power, at least not in terms of with his newspaper. Obviously Fox News is a propaganda outlet that only covers for Donald Trump, and they've been doing that this week, ignoring the Epstein story. But Rupert is allowing the Journal to really continue to spotlight Donald Trump's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. And I think that indicates he's not probably going to be settling this lawsuit anytime soon. In fact, there's some irony here. I think the best thing that, someone was telling me that the best thing for Donald Trump here to give him an off-ramp is if a court just tosses out his lawsuit and he can just blame it on some liberal judge that Obama or whoever appointed. Because otherwise this is going to go forward. And I don't think Donald Trump wants to go into discovery on this issue.
No, I feel like that really could come back to haunt him. And
isn't that weird though, that the best thing for Donald Trump, the favor for Donald Trump would be to toss his lawsuit and not let it go forward?
Yeah, what a time to be alive. I think there's a lot going on here that it's sort of dividing also the MAGA base on this. We saw them carrying the pitchforks for so long about the Epstein conspiracy and the Epstein files and the client list. And this was a really big deal, a huge rallying cry for the base. I actually think that Trump overestimates his ability to just tamp this down and make it go away. I think it's clear that he has decided, his administration has decided that the best course of action is to try to immediately go on offense and to try to launch a distraction campaign. And we've seen that twofold, right? We launch a lawsuit, call this fake news. This latest story, in fact, that the Journal published, saying that Pam Bondi told Donald Trump that he is in fact on the in the Epstein files. The response was that this is a fake news story. So it's like the same old playbook, but then you add the lawsuit into it, and then you add a distraction campaign. And we've seen Donald Trump's DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, come out and launch this really, incredible and hysterical attack on Barack Obama and his administration, claiming that back in 2016 that Obama and his, highest level staff concocted this conspiracy to frame the Russia investigation into Donald Trump as a massive hoax, a conspiracy to confuse the public and to destroy Donald Trump's chances of winning. Obviously, he won the presidency in 2016. Members of his own administration and members of the MAGA media, including Sean Hannity, later went on to say, we know that Russia tried to meddle in the election. These were settled issues, and now they're being resurfaced with really strong hyperbole to reignite the base, and we're seeing Fox really take this bait. Media Matters ran a study this week where they looked at the number of mentions on the air. Fox News mentioned Obama more than 3 times as much as Epstein, which comes after, of course, Donald Trump called his allies and said, hey, let's stop talking about this Epstein thing. Like, I really want this thing to go away. And we've now seen Congress recess early to go away for the entire summer until September. Another just astonishing thing. And why are they doing that? For one reason only, to not have to vote to release the Epstein files. And this thing it feels like it has the ability to overwhelm his administration in that it's not going to go away. And every day now we learn more and more about his connection. And he should have known this. He allegedly wrote this card to Jeffrey Epstein. He had Epstein over to his Mar-a-Lago resort and partied with young girls together, according to the New York Times. And the two of them, they've done all this stuff. And yet, in order to get back into the presidency, along with his allies who he's appointed, they continued to push this. And now he's stuck in this position of, what am I going to do now? Now I have to turn the volume down and say it's a hoax.
I will dissent from you slightly here. I do think this is going to blow over because it seems like, from my observations, MAGA media is sort of moving on in some ways. The initial thing was all about MAGA media applying pressure to release the files. Then it becomes clear that Donald Trump's in the files. And yes, some people have commented on that and noted this. But if Barack Obama were in the files, let's just say that, he would be being called a pedophile left and right by Fox News and the MAGA media people. He'd be called the worst things: sick, pedophile, evil, should be thrown in jail, et cetera, et cetera. With Donald Trump, you're not really seeing that. Even amongst the people who were calling for the Epstein files to be released, you're not seeing them call Donald Trump a pedophile or any of that similar language that would happen if Barack Obama's name were in the files and this were related to him. And so I think that the MAGA base, the MAGA media apparatus, is still giving Donald Trump quite a benefit of the doubt. And notably, Fox News, which was on the Epstein story, you had Jesse Waters even come out and say, no one believes the reason you're not releasing the files. They have completely pivoted. They've decided to run with Donald Trump's, ridiculously absurd narrative about Barack Obama. And I was watching last night, and it was like all of it was like Obama cooked up Russiagate, and this is a historic moment. I was watching Ted Cruz saying this is a day that will live in infamy like Pearl Harbor. I mean, what an insult to everyone who died at Pearl Harbor. And he said that, I think, on Laura Ingraham's show. And so they have moved on, I think, by and large. Fox News is covering for him. A lot of the MAGA base that was really about releasing the files, you're not seeing them target Donald Trump with the same level of attacks or the same questions they would have for a Democrat. And so I tend to think that while this has been a very bad moment for Donald Trump, he will be fine in the end. And I think 6 months from now, this will have blown over. But it was just, I think it was more, I think the damage has really been in establishing rifts in his administration, where it's clear now that Dan Bongino and Donald Trump probably don't have the best relationship anymore. Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Bongino are obviously not on the best ground. It's really exposed these right-wing talkers like Dan Bongino and Kash Patel. And, I guess to some extent Pam Bondi, because she was kind of like a television personality appearing so much on TV. It's exposed them as frauds. They obviously don't care about releasing the Epstein files if it hurts their guy. And I think it's going to be more difficult for someone like Bongino maybe to have any credibility as a podcast host later with this audience. But I just tend to think that like the pivot you're seeing in the way MAGA media has talked about this is telling and indicates this is going to be swept under the rug as all other Donald Trump scandals are.
I don't know. I actually think
that universe. I mean, everyone else
I think that we're maybe in a temporary phase. The problem, I think, is that MAGA media, the far right, have been taught for so long to distrust the mainstream media. So now that mainstream media, with the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, CNN, are reporting this really important information of what is in these files, now you see them reach this sort of fork in the road of like, oh, great. Now we have this reporting, but it's coming from mainstream outlets. We know we can't trust the mainstream outlets. So therefore, is this real? Is this not real?
But if this came, wait, hold on. Outlets reporting that Barack Obama's name was in there, they would be all about believing CNN and the New York Times. But because it's Donald Trump's name in there, they don't want to believe it. And so I think
so they can frame it as a political hatchet job. And so that's basically what they're doing here. But I think that I think that like this runs so deep, it is so foundational to the core MAGA belief of there are elite pedophiles, the idea of QAnon, that Jeffrey Epstein played a role in it, that there is protection now. I think Donald Trump is getting wrapped up in this idea that he is a part of the deep state. And the base is right now currently absorbing this idea, and his highest level media supporters on the Daily Wire and these podcasts and Benny Johnson, all of them are facing this decision right now of like, how do I balance this? I whipped this up and now we're just supposed to pretend it doesn't exist?
But the way they're going to balance it, they have two choices before them, right? Either you're going after Donald Trump because his name is in the Epstein files, or you're going to find a way to sweep this under the rug and move on and distract with something else. And Donald Trump has given them a brand new shiny object where Obama is apparently guilty of treason And, he's retweeted that video or reposted that video about Barack Obama being arrested. And it was an AI-generated video. And anyway, so that's the fork in the road. And I'm saying, I don't know if you're saying something different. I'm seeing them all take the bait and move on with the shiny object. It's almost like an off-ramp for them. And Donald Trump gave it to them. And I think that's where they're going to go. I don't really think that they're going to target. I don't think you're going to see Benny Johnson or Sean Hannity or Jesse Waters or any of these people go after President Trump and say, why are you in the Epstein files? Are you a pedophile? Like they would with anyone else. I think that they're going to just move on, and the House is going to recess. It's going to relieve a little more pressure, and it's still the summer. And I just cannot imagine in 6 months that this is a major core issue for the base. I think they'll end up rallying behind Donald Trump. And because at the end of the day, none of these people have the fortitude to take on Donald Trump. They're all cowards and they're all propagandists. And what do propagandists and cowards do? They take orders from the guy they serve, and that's Donald Trump, and he's giving them orders, and I think they're going to take it.
Yeah.
They are taking it. I don't think they're taking it. They are actively taking it. So
yeah, one of the funniest lines in this latest journal story on Trump and Epstein is about Dan Bongino himself, which I'll read it for you. It says, Bongino has told colleagues that his association with the administration's decision to keep the files private has eroded his credibility among the base of support that fueled his rise as a successful podcaster and media personality on the right, according to a person familiar. Incredible, right? And this is where I think that these podcasters, these right-wing influencers, they could say, look, we're reading these reports. We don't trust the mainstream media. If the New York Times reports it, New York Slimes, we're not going to trust it. If that hack Rupert Murdoch, who Trump is now suing, is reporting this in his mouthpiece paper in the Journal, we're not going to buy it. But what actually solves this whole problem is just releasing the files. So just release the files and let us just let the chips fall where they may. Why would that scenario be one where if you're Benny Johnson, and I've seen Matt Walsh, who's a very far right guy at the Daily Wire, he's even tweeted that they are trying to distract us with this, with Tulsi Gabbard's comments about Obama. I think that there is an uncontrolled MAGA media base out there that is distinct from Fox, which really takes its marching orders just straight from the White House. We know Hannity and co. are on the phone with Donald Trump. I won't be surprised at all if night after night we have these Looney Tunes caricatures of Obama in as a graphic over their shoulder and mocking him repeatedly. I won't be surprised by that at all. But there is an online base that is a different group of media influencers who speak directly to MAGA world. And I think that's not going to go away. And we've now seen that, I think it was the House that voted to subpoena Ghislaine Maxwell. This is, that was Jeffrey Epstein's, right-hand woman in all of this, to subpoena her for testimony, to talk to her. That also suggests that there is a news cycle to come. What is she going to say? Or are they going to offer her a deal? The top of the Drudge Report for days now has been floating this idea of her getting a pardon to make this all go away. I see that they're working in overtime right now to deflect and defend between the White House and Fox. That's sort of confluence that has continued to be there for years now, of that symbiotic relationship of scratching each other's back. I feel like this is going to keep dripping out. Do we think this is the last big story from the Journal? Maybe we get a photo of this card, this birthday card. It certainly exists somewhere. There's also certainly people within the administration who are talking to reporters, either in a U.S. attorney's office or within the DOJ, who have had access to this. It's not an accident that this has come out, or it's Ghislaine Maxwell's attorneys. Who knows with the sourcing. But my view is that they're going to try to sweep this under the rug, but unsuccessfully, because ultimately, and going back to this Bongino line, they are out to protect themselves. Their credibility now is being destroyed. And Bongino telling his colleagues that he is now really upset because this has wrecked his credibility, I think speaks volumes about who they may be looking out to protect.
I generally agree with that they're out to protect themselves, but I think that Donald Trump has given them an off ramp, and I think they're going to take it. And I think it's notable Fox News has stopped covering this. So I think this is now more a conventional scandal story for Donald Trump, where CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times and every mainstream outlet is covering this nonstop. And right-wing media is doing something totally different and on the offense against, a Democrat with a made-up conspiracy theory. And it just seems to me like that's the road they're going to go down. I have a hard time thinking that Fox is going to pivot. I have a hard time thinking that Benny Johnson's going to start going after Donald Trump directly. I just don't think that's the way it's going to work.
You're right. You're definitely right about that. But I just think there's an uncontrolled
It was easier when it was like, why aren't you releasing the Epstein files? We want to see the Epstein files. Now that they know, because they all believe the reporting, it's not like they don't believe it. They all believe and know that Donald Trump's probably in there and has a relationship with Epstein. And it's not going to be good for him. They are now quiet because none of these people like to go directly against him in a meaningful way. And maybe that will change. I just don't think it will. There are certainly going to be outliers. And I think he's certainly lost a few of his supporters. I don't question that. And I think some of his big supporters, maybe Candace Owens, someone like her, has clearly turned on Donald Trump and said she's embarrassed that she had told people to vote for him and all that. And there's people like her out there. But I think the majority of the MAGA media universe is going to back him. And I guess we'll see in a few months.
Yeah. I mean, I think everything is turned on its head, right? It's never been Democrats. It's never been the mainstream press that has been openly questioning the Epstein files, the connections, who is connected to this, this pedophilia ring idea. It must be totally jarring to be on the far right, having been banging this drum for so long. And I think that's become, I think that's just sort of rattled their brains, their very red-pilled brains of like, wait a minute, how can the Democrats be asking these questions now? How come they're the ones? Well, that means it must be fake. That means it must be a political hit job. It's like they're just completely thrown for, we've been claiming about pedophiles and Epstein for so long. How could this be? But, we will see. We will see. Over the last week, Fox News has only mentioned Epstein 127 times, according to this Media Matters tally. But by comparison, farther to the right on Newsmax, instead of 127, it's been 700 times. They talked about it 5 times more. CNN 1,400, MSNBC 1,800. So the mainstream press, but also the fringier space has still been talking about it. So I don't know where this is going to go, but my hunch, Oliver, is we're going to keep talking about this for a while. That there's going to be new bombshells. These reporters are not going to suddenly back off. And I think this is going to continue to pose a dilemma for the far right and for Fox as to how to cover this and what to do. And if you're a savvy media operator, you're Rupert Murdoch, you've got your placate Trump on Fox, and then you've got your reporters doing the hard work, digging to files, talking to sources at the Wall Street Journal. And I think we're going to continue to see him do both things with the left and the right hand there. But
and by the way, remarkable that Donald Trump would sue Rupert Murdoch, given that he is allowing Fox News to continue operating like a propaganda organ for him and to continue shielding him from all this stuff. Because Rupert Murdoch, Rupert Murdoch can snap his finger and say, I want Fox News. I want every single show leading with Epstein. And it would likely have to happen, right? He's the boss there. And he's not doing that. He's allowing them to look at the shiny object of Obama, which, by the way, very dangerous language being used, I'd say, and very disturbing language being used about him and talking about basically imprisoning a former president for a completely phony conspiracy theory. But anyway, outside that point, Donald Trump should be writing a thank you card to Rupert Murdoch and not sending a lawsuit his direction.
I heard he doesn't write cards. I heard he doesn't do any drawings. None of that. I don't write drawings. Well, Oliver, that's it for us this week. Thanks for listening. I hope you have a great weekend. Power Lines is presented by Status and hosted by Oliver Darcy and me, Jon Passantino. The show is produced by Matt Havia and Antonio Enriquez in association with In the Arena Studios. Please like, share, and subscribe to Power Lines on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen, and watch full episodes and clips on our YouTube page at Status.